All right, so today we are talking about how to complete the program management agreement. So hopefully by the end of our time together, you will be able to articulate the purpose of this document and the role it plays in implementation, and then also to review the strategies for actually how to complete it. So hopefully you'll get all your answers, all your questions answered, and be able to move forward completing this and completing that step in the implementation process. So just as a reminder for folks who may not have heard this before, in 2017, back in April, the Tennessee State Board did adopt a revised school counseling policy that really set new expectations for the role of school counseling programs in our school and the impact that they have on our student success. The overview of the policy really helps to define what the comprehensive school program should look like. It identifies standards that prepare students for post-secondary and workforce success. It also is going to create some consistency in the counseling services our students receive across the state and ensures that all students have access to a comprehensive school counseling program. And we know with the department's emphasis on all means all, we want to make sure that all students do have access to those services that can be of benefit to them during their educational experience. Also included in that policy is the full implementation date of August of 2018. So hopefully you have seen this policy, you know about the new expectations, you've participated in some of the trainings and learning opportunities to dig in a little bit more about what this means and what implementation looks like. The program management agreement is one piece of that. What we know and expect to happen as a result of making this change and implementing these new expectations is that we're going to start to see gains in student achievement and success. Because of the new expectations with ESSA, we know that strong school counseling can impact that in a very positive way. We're going to increase the time spent actually delivering counseling services by our school counselors. Part of the program is to develop and establish specific program goals every year that the counseling program will address. So we'll be seeing our counseling programs using data to identify those goals and then also going back and evaluating and see how the programs and strategies included in the program are really impacting students. And finally, having these new expectations will increase counselor effectiveness across the board. So one of the reasons we're focusing on this, we know at the department the importance of every student having an effective pathway through K-12 education into post-secondary education and training and then on into the workforce. So the implementation of the school counseling model and policies really supports the work going on here at the department. So if you're not familiar, here's a quick review. This is a slide that many of you have probably seen, that we've used quite a bit over the last couple of years in rolling this out. We know that the Tennessee model of school counseling is designed to impact 3 domains of student development: the academic achievement, social emotional development, and the cause and career readiness of all of our students. It's made up of 4 components, the first of which is the foundation, and that foundation sets the why we do what we do. So it helps us to look at both the philosophical issues and reasons that drive this work. It helps us look at data. It helps us look at student needs, and then also the legal and ethical guidelines that help drive and define what the school counseling program should look like. The management component is the how we do what we do. If you are a school counselor or you know a school counselor, you know they have a lot on their plate. So we want to be sure that we have effective and efficient tools and processes that help us to be sure that all students can access an effective counseling program. The third component is the delivery, and that's the actual work that school counselors do with students. It's the classroom curriculum delivery, it's the prevention work around teaching standards, it's the intervention work with student planning, responding to student needs, whether they be crisis services or our homeless student population, any of those things that really cause our students to not be able to focus on learning. The counselor can address those through responsive services. It also includes the work we do on behalf of students. So whether we're consulting with parents, we're collaborating with other educators, or referring families to community organizations and providers who can serve them, all of that work kind of makes up that delivery component. And the final component of the model is accountability, and this is where we use tools and assessments and processes to ensure that our counseling program is making a difference for our students. All counselors should be able to articulate how their students are different as a result of participating in their counseling program. So that's a quick review of the 4 components. The graphic you see on the screen is a reminder that as we are building these programs and developing these programs, our goal, a lot of us like that structure, is to create a program that is really about 80% delivery, so that 80% of the time spent with the counseling program, and this is for the totality of the year, so not a day-to-day kind of ratio, but looking at an entire year, that 80% of the time the counselor is involved in the program, they're actually working with students or on behalf of students. The remaining 20% is that time that we devote to building our foundation, managing our program, and then looking at effectiveness through accountability. I mentioned the standards. We know that's a really important part of the revised model. Our standards are also built on those 3 domains of student development. We've got academic development, again, social and emotional development, and college and career readiness. And we know that research has told us these are the attitudes, knowledge, skills, and experiences that will help our students to be prepared to not only enroll and go on to post-secondary, but to be successful there and move into the workforce. So today we're focusing on the program management agreement. As we look at the components, this is a really important tool that fits into the management component of the new model. Excuse me. So what is the program management agreement? Many of you have the actual form right there in front of you. So it is a template, and again, a lot of us like the structure of knowing what to fill out, but really the program management agreement is about a process of planning that happens between school counselors and their administrator. It spells out expectations for the counseling program for the next school year. It helps to organize that program and make sure that the school counseling program is aligning to your school improvement goals. The counseling program should be seen as an integral part in meeting the goals and not something separate. It does help everyone make sure we're on the same page in terms of expectations. Typically, process-wise, it's completed early in the school year or right prior to the school year. It should be done after counselors have had time to look at school and student data, to gather needs assessment data so that they can ensure that the programs and services that they are designing and developing for their program are really aligned to the needs of the students in your school. It's a document that can be reviewed throughout the year to evaluate progress toward meeting your program goals and delivering that comprehensive program. So while it's completed in one setting, it certainly can be helpful as you move throughout the year, as situations may change, as conditions may change. It's a good place to go back to reset and to kind of have that ongoing conversation between the counselor and administrator to make sure that the program is in fact meeting the needs of the students in your building. Included in the actual template, and again in the conversation that you have in completing it, it really helps to focus on program expectations. So if you've been to a webinar or been to one of our trainings, you've probably heard us talk about within Foundation the program expectations that are really necessary in order for a strong school counseling program to be delivered to your students. And these expectations are things that school leaders, whether that be administrators, district folks, that they do their active role in ensuring that your students have access to strong counseling programs. So it makes sense that these are the kinds of things that are noted and included in the program management agreement. So quickly going through, and we'll touch on these in a little more detail as we walk through the process of completing the form, but do want to just identify and talk briefly about what those expectations look like. First is budget, and again, this is not something crazy or unexpected. We know that for a counseling program to be effective, that it is going to require some funding. That doesn't mean it has to require lots of funding, but we want to be sure that the program is funded appropriately to meet goals that have impacts on student outcomes, that the counseling department or school counselor has the facilities, the materials, the supplies that they need in order to deliver a high-quality counseling program. So all those things that the administrators are providing to the classroom teachers and other programs throughout the building. School counseling is a part of that as well. So we just want to highlight that and note its importance in being able to deliver a strong program. Beyond the budget materials, looking at staffing and ratios is certainly an area of concern as we think about delivering effective counseling services. We know that the BEP funding formula sets a ratio of 1 counselor to 500 students in kindergarten through 6th grade, and then in 7th through 12th grade, that ratio is 1 to 350. When we have looked at ratios throughout the state, we know that for many of our schools, that students don't have a counselor there at that ratio, that current ratio. So while administrators may not have funding to create new positions, some of the work that can be done around staffing and ratios is looking at responsibilities. Are there some responsibilities that could be reassigned to someone other than the school counselor? Is there administrative support? Are there collaborations that could be developed that could help offset large ratios when there's not funding to bring in new positions? We are talking through what some of those things look like in our administrator study councils, in our early adopters, so we'll be continuing to release that information so that as a school counseling team of counselor and administrator, that you guys have as many options to review and to think through as we can give you. I mentioned before the 80-20% of time. Again, administrators are a huge part of that in identifying what the responsibilities are of the school counselor and what that schedule looks like. So they definitely support the counseling program by ensuring that students have access to their counselor, direct access at least 80% or around 80% of the time throughout the school year. And the final program expectation is around those appropriate school counseling activities. Even though we're not all in the same room, I will talk about the elephant in the room, which is testing. We know that being responsible for coordinating and managing testing is something that a lot of our counselors are doing across the state. And while that isn't a very important task and an important responsibility, it's preventing students from having access to strong counseling programs. So the policy does call for that responsibility to be reassigned. And again, as we're collecting best practices and strategies, we'll share those out. The other responsibility that we're seeing a lot of is counselors that are teaching academic interventions through RTI. We've got lots of counselors that are teaching math and English and language. And again, making sure students have that knowledge base is really important. But when that happens, the kids don't have access to the appropriate responsibilities and activities that the counselor can provide in terms of RTI and addressing the non-academic issues that may be impacting students' performance, you know, the climate issues, the needs that students may have that are interfering with their learning. So those two things, the data showed us, were really significant in terms of keeping programs from being fully implemented and really accessible to all students. So the board included those specifically in the policy. So all those things are addressed as we, in the program management agreement and the conversation that comes as a result of that. So you see on your screen there is a copy of the template. So if you didn't get one, this is what it starts to look like. When you can access the actual presentation, you'll be able to scroll through this. We also will have the template on the website. I apologize if you've gone now to look for it. Because of the website migration that the department has been under, a lot of those links are currently not working, and so we are working with our folks here to correct those and fix those so that you can have access to all of these templates that we refer to. If you need them and you cannot get them on the website, just shoot us an email at that school.counseling@tn.gov email address, and we can email those back to you so that you can have them as you need them right now. All right, so the first part of the program management agreement, and we're just going to walk through this step by step, is identifying the mission. If you've looked at the implementation guide, which is available to school counselors to walk them through the entire implementation process, the mission statement and vision statement are one of the early steps that need to be done because we know that the mission and vision statements, those provide focus and direction for the counseling program, and it also makes sure that the program is aligning to school and district and state goals. The difference that we want counselors to identify in the school counseling mission is how the counseling program can uniquely contribute to meeting school needs. And because that is such a great foundation for our program, it is included in the program management agreement. Again, just to kind of give direction to this process and make sure that we stay focused on providing a comprehensive program that really is about impacting students in a positive way. So you'll note it's just a place where that is filled in. Counselors ought to come to you with that already completed. Hopefully counselors have engaged administrators and other stakeholders in developing that mission statement. So this won't be the first time administrators see it, but again, just helps to ground this work. The next section is about school counseling program goals. So real quickly, what this looks like is ensuring that our counseling programs are working towards impacting student behavior in a positive way. And this isn't just discipline behavior. This is, attendance, it's academic achievement, it could be course enrollment patterns, lots of different areas and data points can fall into this student behavior area that counselors should be focusing on. So we want the counselors and administrators to talk together about what these goals look like. They should be based in school and student data. So they should promote, as I mentioned, achievement, attendance, behavior, school safety. They should align and support the school improvement goals that the school leadership team has identified for the current school year. And really having that focus helps to drive the individual services and activities and interventions that are included in the comprehensive school counseling program each year. So examples of these, I've got a couple on the screen that have actually been done by some of our counselors in the state in the past couple years. We had a high school group of counselors that increased the percentage of students enrolling in post-secondary education and training. In 1 year, they increased that number from 57% to 82% of their 12th grade students enrolled in post-secondary. And we know that's a huge jump, and that has implications for ESSA, as well as it's what's right for students. We know that if they'll enroll in post-secondary, that the options for them really do open up. Another data point that is also included in ESSA is chronic absenteeism. And so last year we had an elementary counselor work with her administrator in January to look at their chronic absenteeism. They developed some strategies and some interventions and put those into place. And by April, so 4 short months later, they were able to reduce their chronic absenteeism by 38%. So again, these are really important data points in terms of accountability, but more importantly, they're significant for our students because it means our students are getting more academic instruction, more support. They're building those stronger pathways, which we know will lead them to greater success. Had another counselor recently who was looking at his caseload and noticed that there was a disproportionate number of African American males on his caseload that were not participating in early post-secondary opportunities. And so he built in some strategies to really recruit those males on his caseload and make sure they understood what EPSOs are, provided some connection to their post-secondary plans. And while we don't have the data right away, he has seen an increase in the number of African-American males who are taking those EPSOs. And so, again, another example of looking even at subgroup data and seeing how the counseling program can impact that. So as counselors are thinking through and reviewing the data, making sure that counselors and administrators are on the same page in terms of program goals is really important. The next piece I want to acknowledge, and as I'm looking at my template, you will see this is a tad bit out of order, and I apologize for that. Action plans are documents that kind of break down some of those program goals into smaller pieces, and looking at what are the actual interventions and programs and services that the counseling program is going to provide that will help us to meet those program goals. So as counselors are talking to you about their program goals, administrators, we want you to know that these action plans are there. This is a good time to review those as well, because that'll break down some of the roles and responsibilities that the counselor will have throughout the year implementing the comprehensive counseling program. I mentioned it before when we were looking at program expectations, the roles and responsibilities in what a big factor and really the driver of these are our administrators. And so we want there to be part of that conversation that you have with counselors to address what are your expectations, what do those roles look like, what are the responsibilities that help support the counseling program and in turn support school improvement goals and student success. So spelling out what those look like is really important to make sure everybody's on the same page. And so you've got a place there on the program management agreement to start to do that. Certainly you could add to, there's not a ton of lines. You can add more if you want. You can get as detailed as you want, or you can keep it broad. But again, the important thing with this section of the agreement is that those counselors and administrators have a clear understanding of what the expectations are for the counseling program. And that way you can move forward in implementing that program and making a difference for students. One of the things, counselors, that I have shared with you and will continue to share with you, we know that the reassignment of responsibilities in some of our schools is it's a tough lift. Schools don't have a ton of resources. There's not a lot of staff. And so we want to work collaboratively with our administrators. We want to be creative in how we can make sure that we're moving towards full implementation around these responsibilities. That may mean that maybe not everything is taken away in August. Maybe you're now part of a team that helps with testing. Leigh is okay with that. Because we know it's going to take some time. As long as we are all moving towards removing those responsibilities so that, again, the focus is on the impact on students so that all students can have access to a comprehensive program. That's where we're moving. But we really, these first few years, there's going to be some kinks and it's going to require some time and some creativity, and we really want to collaborate together. And that's where we'll have really successful programs, is when there's strong collaboration. So there's that use of time again. You've seen that a couple times. There on the sheet, if you've got the template, you can see how it's broken up in the chart. There is a snapshot of that chart also on the screen. Remind you that the time 80-20 split is about the totality of the year. So it's not an expectation that on a day-to-day basis only 80% of your time is spent with students and only 20 is spent with your planning, your management, and your evaluation of your counseling program. You want to be sure that the time is really set based on student needs. So obviously, counselors, as you are having this discussion with your administrators, you need to have done some homework around what are the needs of our students and what are the possible interventions and services that you can provide, and what kind of time does that look like, so that you all can make an informed decision together. Another key point that I want to share is around balance of delivery methods. If a school counselor is in a rotation all day, every day, it can look like they're spending 100% of their time in direct services to students. And while that is correct, that is not a comprehensive counseling program. A comprehensive counseling program is going to include all aspects of delivery, so there will be some classroom and curriculum delivery, particularly around giving students the opportunity to meet those counseling standards. But there's also going to be time set aside for individual student planning, even at the elementary level, helping students to think through starting to develop that pathway. That happens in elementary, so we need to be sure our counselors are afforded time to deliver those kinds of services in their counseling program. It also includes responsive services, as I mentioned before, kind of the crisis issues, individual counseling, group counseling, helping students to remedy those significant issues that have come up that are keeping them or preventing them from being able to learn. All of that should be included in the 80% of direct services. And then the student support services. These are the things we do on behalf of students. So whether we're making referrals, consulting, collaborating, all of that also is something that we've got to consider and think about in terms of how the counselor's time is spent. And I apologize, it looks on the screen like the 20% covers student support and program management. The 80% includes direct student services and student support services. So 80% are those pieces. The remaining 20% is your program foundation, management, accountability, fair share duties. Just like everyone else in the building, we should be contributing to the overall operations of the school. So it is fine to have counselors participating in those, just like any other educator or staff person in the building. So all that fits into that 20%. Now, we are not saying that if you spell out certain percentages, that if you go over 1 or under 1%, that we're coming after you, because we're not. These are targets. We know that things happen as the school year progresses. This is a great point to come back and review throughout the year. I mentioned that this document can help you do that. So just having check-ins and see where are we, how are we spending our time? Do we need to make some adjustments either in our expectations around time or in the responsibilities and the programs we're offering? Have things not kind of carried out like we thought they would? So this is a good place that you can come back to reevaluate and review along the way. Got ahead of the slide. All right, I mentioned delivery of services. This slide kind of spells that out in more detail. Moving on to the advisory council, you will see on the template there is a space for discussing the advisory council and putting some plans down. An advisory council is an important part of the implementation process. One of the things that it can do is be a powerful advocate and support for the counseling program. They can provide some feedback on program goals, looking at program results, making recommendations, engaging others, particularly during this time of transition as we're clarifying and revising the role of the school counselor in terms of implementing the school counseling program. Your advisory council can be really helpful in those efforts. It is very important, school counselors, that your administrator is allowed and his feedback is gathered in terms of who those folks need to be that serve on your advisory council. So again, discussing this in your program management agreement conferencing time is really important because you want to make sure that, again, this group is advising the school counseling program, but remember that school counseling program is also about meeting school goals. So we really want everyone to be on the same page. Certainly we want the administrator to be a part of our advisory council, but we want that conversation to happen before you get started bringing those folks together. And you can identify the dates when you're going to meet and those types of things. Typically, advisory councils meet twice a year, so you can look at that. And again, you know, we put dates down and then it snows and the whole state shut down for a week, or we get the flu and lots of systems are out or things come up. So know that just because a date is written on here, it's okay to change if the situation warrants that. As far as developing an advisory council, we do have more details in the implementation guide, but counselors, as you are preparing to have these conversations with your administrators, be prepared to talk about the goals and objectives, who needs to be represented, who would be appropriate candidates for that, how large an advisory council do you need. Talk again about those dates. Is this going to be something where you bring in new folks every year? Will they serve multiple terms? And then kind of the logistics of developing the agenda, making sure you've got recorded minutes. Those are also things that are really important when you apply for RAMP with AFTA. So we'll put a star on that. We're going to talk about that in the future, but those of you that are aware and have gone through that process or are interested, this documentation is very important for that RAMP application. You'll see the next section on the planning management agreement. Brain stop for just a second. Is that you have a series of documents that are identified that should be part of your comprehensive counseling program, particularly that planning and foundation piece and the management piece. So it's important for counselors and administrators to talk about these. The action plans that I mentioned before are listed, calendars, needs assessments, evaluations. All those are great documents that help deliver an effective and efficient counseling program. You need, as counselors, to know what your administrator is expecting from you all in terms of that, being able to see some of those documents. So talking through what each of those are with your administrator and talking about, you know, is this going to be something that you're including this year? When can the administrator expect to see these documents? Again, approximate dates, but just so that you guys are on the same page and have the same expectations. These documents, administrators, are excellent examples of evidence for school counselor evaluation. So we tried to be really smart in how we put these helpful guides and templates together so that they could be utilized in as many ways as possible. So again, there's more details in the implementation guide. There's copies of all these that will be available again on the website once those links are fixed. And again, you all are always welcome to ask questions if you would like more information on any of these particular documents. We know an important part of the school counseling program is collaborating. A counseling program is not delivered wholly by a school counselor. It's really a team effort, and the counselors facilitating and organizing all of the strategies that all of us are working on towards student success. So some examples of what this collaboration could look like are, you know, a school counseling team meeting, meetings between the school counseling department, and I realize in a lot of places that's one person, and an administrator, student support meetings, department chair meetings, school improvement team meetings, if you have district school counseling meetings, other district committee meetings. Examples of this could be if there's a committee of folks that have been brought together at the district level to look at how do we increase the number of early post-secondary opportunities that we make available to our students. That is certainly work that the counselor is doing on behalf of students, because we know that students can benefit if they have more opportunities to choose from. So that falls into that collaboration piece. Meetings in the community with community partners and organizations. They are an important provider in the school counseling program, so when the counselor reaches out and collaborates with those folks, that falls into that category. And certainly that's not an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of the types of collaborations that we would expect to see in a counseling program. So because of that, we want the counselor administrator to think through what that looks like. What places will the counselor serve on committees and do some collaboration? If you've got multiple counselors in your building, is this something where, you know, one counselor will be assigned to do all of those, or will we divide those responsibilities, or is it something that all counselors will attend? So just talking through those so the expectations are clear on both sides of that. It certainly helps to make stronger calendars and better planning when we know what our role is in terms of those opportunities to collaborate. So in terms of just one slide. Okay. Professional evaluation, and I apologize that we don't have that one. Nope. It's looking at obviously the team process. I know we have a couple of districts that have a different process, so thinking about what it looks like for your counselors in that particular process. It's important that counselors and administrators have that conversation starting out. All school counselors, when we're talking about team, should be evaluated with a school services personnel rubric. With that comes the expectation that all evaluations are announced and that it is not just an observation. There are lots of different ways that evaluators can observe a school counselor. It's not just in a classroom setting. It could be in, you know, one of those collaborative meetings we just talked about. It could be in a school-wide program. It could be in working with a family. Lots of opportunities that particularly administrators in a building that you're going to see the counselor do on a day-to-day basis that are quote-unquote observable and useful in terms of evaluation. So we want you to think through your evaluation schedule so that the counselor can prepare. We welcome administrators to come and be a part and observe as many of the activities and programs and services as school counselors can provide. And so just for planning purposes, knowing when those observations are going to be, when counselors will have an opportunity to sit down with their administrator to have a conversation, to share additional evidence and information about the counseling program, which should feed the counselor evaluation. Going ahead and recognizing that at the beginning of the year, identifying those can again help with planning and help build a stronger calendar. We will continue to provide more detailed information on the counselor evaluation going forward. We've done a few things. There's a webinar that we delivered in partnership with our team folks last fall. That is, again, one of the resources on the website that's being relinked. So we'll have that available. We're going to provide some additional resource materials and opportunities to increase our capacity to better evaluate school counselors. So watch for that, and we'll continue to share and support you all in that effort. So the next section is professional development. We know that professional development and continuous learning is really important for all of us, and counselors are certainly included in that as well. What we want is for our school counselors to be able to identify areas of need or areas of growth that are aligned to student need. We've talked about in our collaboratives and in our trainings, looking at the student needs and then looking at the counselor, their competencies, and seeing where are there high needs but low, sorry, the screen changed. There we go. High needs but maybe a gap in skill or gap in capacity. And so we've asked counselors to think intentionally about the professional development that they need, and to make requests based on student need with student impact in mind, to be able to say to you all as administrators, you know, here's an area of need, here's an opportunity for me to increase my skill set, and I think that if I can do that, here's the anticipated outcome for students. There are lots of opportunities for professional development, but we know that a couple of resources are taxed when we talk about professional development. First, money. Funding is an issue, and we know that schools and administrators, you guys start behind the ball with funding from the first day. So we want to be sure that we're being good stewards of the funding that counselors are given for professional learning and professional development. And then second, time. Time is such a precious resource that we want to be sure that when our counselors are out of the building, when they're not able to serve our students, that they are having meaningful learning opportunities. And so by being thoughtful and intentional and using student data to identify those areas of professional growth each year, we hope that we will start to see stronger professional learning impact on our students. So on your program management agreement, there's a place where you can identify the goal, talk about the student needs that it's going to address, the expected student outcomes, and what those opportunities look like. As a department or office, we will be providing districts and schools and counselors moving forward in the somewhat near future with some strategies and some points of consideration in terms of individual professional learning, district professional learning opportunities, and then the statewide professional opportunities that are available to students. So the next piece on your program management agreement comes back to those the program expectations we talked about before with budget and resources. In order to plan, sorry, the screen keeps jumping around. In order to plan appropriately, it's important to have those conversations. So what kind of funding is available to the counseling program? And again, the counselor should be able to speak to how their requests for funding are going to impact student achievement and student outcomes, making sure that there are facilities in place, particularly that protect student confidentiality. So counseling in a conference room or waiting room area where students are walking back and forth does not protect student confidentiality. So being thoughtful and sometimes creative about the space that counselors are given to provide the group counseling, individual counseling, and work that they do with individual students and families. Being sure that they have materials to support the delivery of the activities and programs in their comprehensive program, and then access to technology. All of those things, again, we know most schools have these in place, but it's a good idea to just talk about them. I will share that we are working with our partners at THEC, the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission, specifically collegefortn.org, to build out a counselor resource center that will have strategies, lesson plans, materials, resources that counselors can use, and we'll be getting great examples from our counselors out in the field. But this will be a good place that counselors can go and find good materials that will also be free. Again, thinking about funding, we want to try to make it as easy as possible for counselors to be able to do this important work. So I'm not saying don't spend money on good materials, but just know that as a department in partnership with College for TN, that we are going to try to provide some of those best practices that won't require any funding at all. So in having that discussion, sitting down, talking about what funds are available to support the program, spelling that out is another step in completing the program management agreement. There's our professional evaluation slide. I will switch those so that they are in line with the document before we make that public on the website again. And then finally, a couple things just to consider. They're more logistical type things, but making sure that everyone is clear on school counselor availability. If the school counselor is going to be in classrooms for, a percentage of their time, when are they going to be available to do the individual work with students or to consult with families? When will the counselor be available to meet with folks coming into our building? And it's important to set a time so that as you are communicating with all of your stakeholders, whether they be students, families, community organizations, other educators, other district folks, that there's an understanding of this is when there is time that we've set aside and designated for counselors to be available for this type of intervention and service. By no means does it mean that they can't provide those services at all other times, but we do want, it's helpful when you build a calendar to be able to say, we're going to designate, this time every day or this time Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, or however you want to do that makes most sense given the needs of your building, so that can be communicated with your stakeholders, and so there's a clear understanding of how to access counseling services. Another thing to consider is who is available that can also support your counseling program. Who in terms of other staff? Are there places where counselors can collaborate with content area teachers, other providers, school social workers, school nurses, school psychologists, thinking through all of the initiatives and programs that you have within your building. Are there places for collaboration? And let's identify those and create an opportunity for that collaboration to happen so that both programs, both groups, or if there's more than one, can ensure that we're not double dipping or we're not duplicating services, but that we're working collaboratively in a way that preserves resources and makes the best use of those. And then finally, there's a place to sign off. This is not a contract, it is not a legal document, but again, that signature on all ends just indicates the commitment from both the counselor and the administrator to say, this is what our program is going to look like this year, and the understanding that we are on the same page in terms of our expectations. So that's kind of the nutshell version of how to complete this document. While I kind of identify a couple of resources, if you've got questions, I don't know if we've seen any come in yet, but now is the time to ask. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to keep you longer than I asked you to commit, but if you've got some questions around how to complete the specific pieces of it, go ahead and send those in now. While you're doing that, I do want to mention again, we've got lots of resources available. The implementation guide I mentioned, example documents for the implementation process will all be available to you. We will also have examples of completed program management agreements, so that if you want to take a look at a completed one to see how it's set up and some of the strategies and some of the ways that your colleagues throughout the state have done it, we're going to have those available for you as well. We are continuing to address these in the counselor collaborative. Our school counselor coaches are available in each of our core regions to provide support both in training at the collaboratives and individually if you want to reach out to the coaches. This summer we also are going to offer a summer boot camp training, a full day training in each of our core regions. Those dates have been released in the counselor newsletter, so I encourage you to take a look at that. And if you've not gotten a copy or you're not on our newsletter list, I really encourage you to sign up for that because that's a primary form of communication. So that will let you know when these trainings are, and as we share different examples and documents, that'll also be included there in the newsletter. But that summer boot camp, you'll find out more, but ideally we'd love for counselors and administrators to come together as teams. I could see a time where you work together and even get this program management agreement completed at that boot camp so that you can start the year off on the same page. So those are some additional resources that are available to you. All right, before we look at our objectives, let me see the questions. Where are the example documents located? As I mentioned, the templates are hopefully, we don't have a hard date for when they'll be back live with the links working. We are currently collecting documents from our early adopters and model consortium schools. And so as we have those, they will also be there on the website. So we'll watch for those to happen. Again, if you need something quick, shoot us an email because I'm happy to, we can shoot that right back out pretty quickly. All right, let me see if there's some other questions. The email address to contact us for any of all of these things we talked about is school.counseling@tn.gov. Question, in what month should a counselor complete this document? I'm not going to tell you exactly what month because you all start back at different times, but I would say either right prior to the school year or shortly thereafter. Because it's a planning document and it sets expectations, it really makes sense to go ahead and do it pretty early. If you don't do a needs assessment at the end of the year and you are waiting for that data to do one in the fall rather so you can get that data, it may be that you start the conversation, particularly around the roles and responsibilities and some of those other pieces of your program management agreement right as school starts, and then come back and meet again when you've got your data, and then can look at your program goals, your action plans, and those pieces. Yes. Another question, examples will be available. Yes, we're going to make those available to you. How do I sign up for the newsletter? You are, shoot us an email at school.counseling@tn.gov. We'll get you signed up. Somebody even said they are meeting tomorrow to discuss the program management agreement. So yay for you. Please let us know if you've got additional questions around particularly this piece, but even the entire implementation process. I am working with our core directors to get on agendas at principal study councils and supervisor study councils throughout the state so that I can provide additional support to our school leaders and supporting your school counselors as they implement this and to talk about your role and to give you the information and resources you need. So don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do to support you. We know at the end of the day that this is really about making sure our students have what they need to be successful, and that when we can provide them the support, the wraparound services that are so much a part of a school counseling program, we know that they are more prepared to learn now and ready to move forward, whether that's transitioning from elementary to middle, middle to high, high into post-secondary, or post-secondary into the workforce. So with that, I will close out. My contact information is there on the screen. Thank you guys for taking an hour of your day. We had a huge crowd, and so we're thankful that you are interested. And if there are other topics that you would like us to address in a webinar, go ahead and shoot us an email, and we will try to accommodate those requests for you. As always, it's great to partner with you all. Thank you for what you do in supporting our students and building and supporting strong counseling programs for them. Everyone have a great day. Thanks.